Today on the ONS podcast, I have a good friend of mine. His name is Josh Blank. Josh Blank is a serial entrepreneur, real estate investor, and broker, and we're just going to talk business today on the ONS podcast. I hope you enjoy. Josh, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
So the ONS podcast, we try to dive deep into a lot of different things. I've interviewed athletes, I've interviewed influencers, and you're kind of the first guy that I've had on to talk business.
Okay.
I'm a young guy in this entrepreneurial world,
Right.
And I've learned a lot of lessons in my few years, but I know you're a seasoned vet. You've been doing this for a long time.
Very long, yeah.
Primarily in real estate, but you've had a lot of different endeavors. So I kind of wanted to break down, so let's start from the beginning. What got you in to entrepreneurship and real estate specifically?
I think I would never have done. I got out of school and was interviewing for positions. I was always in banking. So when I was a really young kid, I got the guy in my class who made the most money per hour was a construction worker, and I was like, man, that looks terrible. And I had heard about this girl, and she was working at a bank, and she was making as much as this guy, and he was killing himself, moving concrete and humping lumber around. And I was just like, oh, that sounds terrible. And she's sitting in an air-conditioned bank counting out money as a teller, and I was like, well, I'm gonna do that. So I started as a teller, and I've always been wired for economics and finance. It's just how I'm wired. I think about money all the time, not necessarily on purpose, but it's just how I'm wired. And so I was trying to come up with the best hack to make the most money in the least amount of time. And so the banking job was really cool. I learned a ton about the industry. I just learned, most entrepreneurs try not to pay any taxes, and they're always befuddled when they can't get a loan. And I'm like, you have to claim your income, pay your taxes so you can borrow money, so you can, So it kind of started in that vein, and I went to school, graduated, and I was trying to tell my dad, hey, I want to take the summer off, and he was just like, no, you're going right to work. You're not sitting around. I was like, gosh, I want to go to Europe. And he's like, work. And so he put me right to work, and I got a job at a bank. I interviewed at a few different places. I didn't know if I was going to do consulting. Back in the day, a lot of people were going the Arthur Andersons and these big consulting firms, but they worked you to death. It was 70 hours traveling all the time, and I was like, I'm not trying to travel,
Yeah.
Not to these awful places, right? And so I took a job.
Not the fun kind of travel.
No, not good travel. Yeah. Not fun travel.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
You're going
to
Scranton, Ohio.
Yeah, you're going to Wichita and doing long division all weekend. I'm like, that's not interesting. So I opted for a banking career. I was an analyst in a commercial underwriting division.
Okay.
So again, they had to teach you how to read a P&L, how to break it apart. Depreciation is a huge thing, the rich dad type stuff. The secret in real estate is that you can depreciate it. And all that is taking the building or the house or the asset and dividing the value of the property over 27 and a half years as if it's residential or 39 years if it's commercial. And people act like that's some sort of magic, free, passive income for life and never pay tax. I'm like, not really, right? Not even close. So they taught me depreciation and add backs and things like that. And there is a little bit of a tax shelter, which is great. But, consult your CPA. I'm not a CPA. But I learned that trick, and I saw, okay, that's what they're doing. They're buying machinery and equipment. They're buying buildings. They're depreciating it, and then they're refinancing it later or selling that asset, and they pay a lower tax rate on long-term capital gain. So it was interesting. I learned a lot. But within 3-6 months, I was like, I'm going to kill myself. I'm driving to work one day, and I'm like, I think I just want to jerk my wheel into oncoming traffic rather than going to this bank again. There was no people of the opposite sex. It was a bunch of old crotchety dudes sitting around. They were just nasty.
Right.
It was it was awful. It was what is Office Space? I mean, it was like that. I was in a cubicle, and I was like, oh my God. So what happened was, I get in one day, and they're like, we are out of desks on the bank floor. And since you're the youngest junior analyst, you're going in the basement. And this couldn't have been legal. There's no way it was legal to put somebody in a basement. They put me in the basement of the bank. And I had this little desk and this cinder block wall, and the vault was over there. And I just by myself in a basement of a bank. And I was like, I went to college for 4 years, got good grades, graduated, and I sit in a basement. And I was beside myself. So I was like, I have to do something else. And a friend of a friend's dad introduced me to the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which is every entrepreneur has read it, right?
Yeah.
But they talked about not just the real estate end of it, but owning a business. And that really sparked, from that bank job, I jumped to a couple other bank jobs. but they were all with like the worst manager you've ever had. Like if you can imagine a caricature, like a Michael Scott from The Office, that bad of a boss. And I was like,
I would love to have that bad of a boss.
oh, it was so bad. These bosses were so bad. And out of that like pain of like, this is so stupid. Why are we doing this all day long every day? It's nonsense. And I was like, I have to do something on my own.
Right.
So I bought a house, nights and weekends. I worked on it, fixed it up and sold it. And I made more money on that house than I made my first year working. And I was like, okay, I got to go to this job all day, every day, 8-10 hours. I can't afford the foot-long sub. You know, they don't pay me very much, pay me $40,000. And I made more than that on this house. I was like, cha-ching.
Right.
And then I knew how to borrow money.
Yeah.
So I knew you had to claim your income. I claimed all my income. You know, I was paying my taxes, and I could just borrow. And credit was loose then.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same now, but anybody could get a loan. And first year I did one house, the next year I did 2 houses, the next year I did 5 houses. Then I was like, we got to the point where we're doing 100 houses a year. So
Yeah.
I'd buy, fix up and sell, or buy, fix up and rent these houses. And it was like a printing press of money. You know, it worked really well for me. But it kind of came from all that came from a place of necessity. Now, had I had an awesome boss and a cushy office and like an amazing experience, I might not have done it. But I did it out of like, this is insane. You know, I worked at one point for Citibank for a little while, and you talk about the most inefficient place. It is like everybody's getting some memo thrown on their desk about some problem with some account somewhere, and their whole job is just to get it off their desk and onto somebody else. It's like nobody's solving any problems. Like,
Right.
I had submitted like hundreds of loan applications. They just turned everything down, and I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
This is a joke. So
Right.
I wanted to do something on my own, and I probably was in banking for maybe 2 years, maybe 2.5 or 3, but pretty quickly, I was making more money nights and weekends doing my real estate stuff than I was banking. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
So how long was that time period before you like threw up the deuces and were like, I'm out. I can't do this
One
anymore?
of our clients at the bank hopped a little bit because the only way to get more money was you had to switch banks, and then they pay you a bigger salary. And I got to a place where it was really cushy. So I had a nice office in my hometown. I was the kind of manager for this very small little branch. I was probably 23 or 24 years old, very, very small. I worked under a guy who was one town away. He kind of let me do my own thing. He's like, here's your goal for the year. I can't remember what it was, $5 million or something in loans. He's like, why don't you bring this in? You know, I want you to manage this for me, help me do this. And so I did that, and he kind of left me alone, and that let me have a little time throughout the day to like think about real estate, my plans, refinance something if I needed to. And I got to knock stuff out. But along the way, I saw that like I had no interest in banking. Like I had not, it became like a commodity or like a utility, right? But the real estate stuff, I was like, man, if I just apply myself, like there's no end of the money. So one of our customers came to me and he said, hey, you know, I was like the junior banker on his account. And he was like, he was a broker. He sold a lot of homes. He sold like 600 homes a year. He was a baller, and he made a lot of money, and he had a nice system. And I was not trying to be mean about the guy, but he just wasn't that smart. He was just kind of like, he had a system, and he knew he could do it, and he was a lot of confidence. And I was like, I can do it. Like,
Yeah.
So pretty quickly, I went to work for him for a little while. Then I went out on my own, and the rest was history. And I never worked for another company again as long as I lived. I mean, the rest, I worked for a bank for 2 years, and then 20 years later, never went back.
Yeah.
Never had to.
I mean, I've known you for 10 years now, and I just
Yeah.
can't imagine you working for somebody.
I think I'm unemployable.
I think so too.
I think like people say things, and I'm just like, that is stupid. Like I'm so focused on the bottom line with it. Like my business right now is there's no fluff. There's no BS. Like I look at my P&L every day and I'm like, can I tweak that? Can I cut that? Can I improve that? Can I, like there's no fluff. Like I see guys and they have hundreds of agents and all these offices and all this staff, and I'm like, that's inefficient, right? Like the end of the day, the point of owning the business is profit for my people. Obviously we want to do a great job for consumers. That's super important. But within the context of the business, of course, we're there to make money, right? I want my agents to make money because that allows me to make money. So I am focused on the bottom line, and I spend all my time thinking about what is going to hit the bottom line and how do we do it efficiently? How do we do it legally? How do we do it professionally? How do we make sure it's clean? But that is my focus, and all of the fluff and jazz I see all these people do, I'm like, you're just wasting time and money, and like huge office spaces. Like the pandemic proved, like I've been reading books for years on business and productivity and how to get the most out of your people. And I just realized like, I'm not one that coaches my people a ton. I'm like, hey, ask me questions, but like if you're wired to make $50,000 a year or $150,000 a year, you're going to do it with or without me, and I'll help you. I'll make you more efficient.
Right.
But I'm not going to change who you are. Like you can't change who people are. So I focused on just grabbing the right people and helping them live in their comfort zone. You know, that flow zone that they live in. Like if whatever their number is they want to make, I'll show them how to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have my numbers too. Like there's a point where I'm like, I'm not working anymore. Like I've got this built. And some people, you know, they work endlessly to just more. And I have a top range and I'm comfortable with that. Like there's a top range where I'm like, okay, if I'm in my top range with my income goals, I am not going to work more. I'm going to enjoy my life more. And that's different than most people. Most people, you know, they get $1 million. What do they want? They want $2 million. They get $2 million. What do they want? $5 million. And I'm just not wired that way. Like I'm like, there is enough for me. And so when I hit that top end, I'm like, cool, we're chilling now. I'm spending time with my kids. I'm spending time doing fun things with my buddies, whatever that is. And so I have a very different approach. But on the low end of the range, if I'm not hitting that, I'm going to work tirelessly to figure out how to get there. And there's just been a couple like serendipitous times in my career. This is one of them now as well. But there was a time before where I had just figured out something that nobody else had figured out. And it was counterintuitive. So the things I think that I like to think about are the counterintuitive things.
Okay.
Like some people are like, oh my God, you got to grind. And I'm like, do you though? Like, am I a better worker or employer or more efficient when I'm exhausted? Not really.
Right.
Like sometimes I'm doing accounting and I'm on like hour 6 of like fixing some problem with my books. And I'm like, I will do better if I just shut this off and do it tomorrow morning. And so I have to work really hard about not grinding and recharging the batteries because I'm so much more efficient and effective when I can just like be clear-headed.
Right.
So the counterintuitive things are what I would say most entrepreneurs, most young guys like yourself, I'm fascinated by things like, you know, you're more productive when you sleep more. Like it's totally counterintuitive. You think like, if I just could work 20 more hours a week, you don't get things done.
Right.
So the counterintuitive things, like we used to buy homes at this auction, and there's a big company came in with lots of money, and they started buying the high-end stuff. And I had done high-end projects. I had bought houses for $400,000 or $500,000, put $100,000 in them, sell them for $600,000, $700,000. And after I did all the math, I'm like, I make as much money, if not more, and way higher ROI doing these little dumpy houses. Walk into the auction, buy a house for 20 grand, do very little work or no work, wholesale it, dump it on the market, whatever, for 59, 60,000. And I'm like, I just made $40,000 in this house. I did nothing.
Right.
And this guy bought this thing, remodeled it, put this fancy kitchen in, did all this stuff, and they made the same $40,000. I'm like, this is insane. You guys are insane. Like, why not just do this? And I see that now with people. They have huge offices and tons of staff and expanding. I'm like, you guys are crazy.
Right.
You know, like I read something the other day. I was shocked by this. Uber loses like, I don't know, gobs of money. To me, I'm like that Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. Like, if it's not making money now, I'm not betting on the if come. Now, I understand, of course, that public companies for a long time will lose money and then they'll become profitable, like the Amazons of the world and things like that. But for me, you know, if you sell $1 billion in something and you lose money, that's not a business I want to be involved in as a shareholder or to mimic that myself. Like there's a company, I won't name the name of the company, but there's a real estate business. They're huge and they're growing like crazy. And they brought in $1 billion of revenue and their net profit was $8 million. $8 million on $1 billion? Like that's not good. That's not even a 1% net profit margin. That's terrible. Like I would never want to be responsible for $1 billion P&L that makes not 1%. That is a ton of work. And people, they buy and sell this equity at these huge multiples. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like, it has less than a 1% profit margin. That's as a banker, the banker in me is like, I don't want to touch that business.
Right.
So I'm kind of spoiled with that banker background, like staring at P&Ls all day. Like, yeah, this guy makes this much money. Okay, that's the cool business. Okay, this guy that seems like a lot of work for that.
Right.
So I'm really like old school with my fundamentals, and I guess that came from being a banker.
Yeah, it's got to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, you're like a Warren Buffett kind of guy. And
I'm not into the high flying stuff. Like I sat out of crypto completely. I know I have buddies who did it. They bought it and they're like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, kind of sounds like pets.com to me. I don't know. Like I don't understand anything about blockchain, the technology, whatever. But
well, I think what it is you started at a foundation that projected you into where you are today.
Yeah.
And I think kind of the basis, like as I'm just hearing you tell your story, the basis of your life is I want to make as much as possible with as little of my time as possible.
Absolutely.
And I've seen you grind your ass off for years to build your current empire.
Yep.
Like, and now you're able to leave for a month at a time. And I think if you really get down to the nuts and bolts of anybody that's in this field of entrepreneurship
Yep.
is their number one goal is freedom.
Yes, for sure.
Right? So
Yep.
like it's not, yes, the byproduct is the nice house and the fancy car and the
Yep.
nice boat or whatever.
Yep.
But what they're really looking for, what they're really searching for is freedom.
Some
And-
people are looking for the boat, the car, the yacht. Some people
yes, but if
are.
you have those things,
Yeah.
you're bound to your business 60, 70 hours a week.
Drive
and
up
you
and down these canals in Sarasota and look at these big houses. I lived on Siesta forever. I'd take my boat and drive around. I'm like, nobody's ever there.
Yeah.
$7 million house, $20 million house, $2 million. Nobody's ever there. They're
Right.
trophies for,
Yeah.
I don't know, hedge fund managers in New York or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But they're trophies. They're not getting used. And to me, I heard somebody a long time ago say, take the fine china in your house and use it. And so I'm getting every ounce out of this life I possibly can.
Yeah.
I am not going to. I am a big saver, a huge saver. I'm an investor within my own business.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some investing, obviously, buying and selling and renting properties and stuff like that. But what I think I'm pretty good at is running a small shop. Like
Mm-hmm.
a small business to me, I thrive there. I can't. I've tried a couple times to really get big or bigger, and I'm never happy. I'm always stressed out. I'm such an OCD freak on like the little details, like. You can, a small mistake can lead to a lawsuit that can be devastating. So
Right.
I try to keep my things really, really clean, constantly consulting attorneys, constantly consulting CPAs. And I just feel better. I think where I shine is a small business, like a small, manageable business. And there's nothing wrong with manageable. I think everybody wants to be Elon Musk and, take over the world. Watch him on Rogan. He looks tortured, right? Like that does not look fun to me.
Well, you also have to look at his life, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what is the end goal for your life?
Right.
Like, what is the byproduct? He's been married 3 times. Is he changing the world? Absolutely. But you're always sacrificing something when you're doing as much as he's doing.
For sure.
And when I think of my friends, like as far as like entrepreneurship and
Yeah.
like the end goal for my business, it's you.
Yeah.
You've gotten to a point to where you're working a few hours a week,
Yep.
or a few hours a day,
Yep.
and you're able to leave your business for a month. You were just down in the Keys for a solid month. I mean, you had to take some calls and stuff like that, but
For
like,
sure.
but-
I didn't tell people, but I looked every day, of course. I'm
Sure.
looking at the banking. I'm looking at the files. I've looked every single day.
Right.
But I limited my communication with the staff because I have a broker associate. I have an office manager. I have an ops person. I have trainers, and I have senior agents. So I've built it to, but now what does somebody in my position do? Let's do it again. Let's go to
Right.
this town and do it
Yeah.
again. And I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
There's a great story in a book called, Jason Fried wrote it. It's Rework. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
And he talks about this incredible bakery where they have just the best croissants in the world, and people line up out the door around the street to get this bread. And when they run out of dough and they run out of bread, they shut the door. It could be 1 o'clock, could be 3 o'clock, could be noon, and they're done. And what does everybody want to do? Let's do another one. What does every successful restaurant that ever, they open a second location, doesn't work, or the third doesn't work.
Right.
So people expand, and then it blows up in their face, especially in this market. Now you're seeing interest rates rise. You're seeing things change. The market's shifting a little bit, right? Things are changing. And a lot of people are at that, 1% profit margin on a big enterprise that was built in a bull market.
Right.
I want to be lean. So when the bear market comes, I have plenty of room. Personally, I'm really lean. And then professionally, I'm super lean too. Like no big office. I don't have a big house. I don't drive a crazy car. I did all that. It was a horrible learning experience. Like there's tears in your eyes when you lose the big house. There's, when you're taking your car to the chopping block to get the, let's just sell this real quick to get
Right.
a payment. Brutal, right?
Right.
I'm never going back there. If I wanted to, I could buy both of those things now.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that there's a better use for capital.
Well, and I was going to ask that because I know you haven't always had this mindset.
No.
How old are you now?
I'm 44, just
44.
Yep.
So you started your business
When I was 24.
I was going to say, in your
21,
20s.
yeah.
So what does a dumbass 20-year-old do when he starts making
Everything
millions
wrong.
of dollars, right?
Everything wrong. I
So
did everything wrong.
Describe to me, like, what were the common mistakes that you made? And sometimes you see a lot of younger
The
entrepreneurs make.
same things I see everybody do. They expand, blow up, restart over, expand. Everybody does it. Like they pick up more overhead, more personal overhead. This car, that car, the motorcycle, bike, boat, second home. I did it all, right? All of it. You can have any or all of those things as long as the fundamentals are really good. And I basically live always like I make a certain percent, like I live on this, and my goal is obviously to make more than that, right? But I never change the way I live. And if I want a bigger house, it's got to be paid in cash. If I want a nicer car, I'm paying cash for it, no debt. Because the market booms and busts. We're going to see a big one here, right? It's starting to slide. They are changing interest rates big time.
Right.
When you locked in, by the grace of God, I don't know what it was, you got the lowest interest rate of anyone I know, right? And you sold your house at the tip of the market. You got the lowest interest rate, got a great deal on your house. Your house exploded in value. You timed everything perfectly, worked out great. Sometimes, to no fault of your own, that won't go your way.
Right.
And I've been, the victim of that by my own doing or just the market itself. But as these things wane and wax, I just love, I go to bed, I sleep so much better with like having a little bit of day. I work every day all day long, but the work I do is managing the business. I think about it all day long, every day. I'm always thinking about how do we make it better? Not bigger, better. I'm always thinking, how do we make more profit for my agents, more profit for myself with less BS, less headache? How do we streamline it? Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. Like last year we did $72 million in sales, and there are companies that do $1 billion in sales. But again, our net profit margin on that money is so much higher than any other firm I've been involved with because I'm so diligent about just not wasting money. And I think that's the focus. And when I see people get sloppy with expenses, and I'm like, it's crazy. You know, it's crazy. When we were rehabbing houses, you could tell what we put in every house. It was the same tile, it was the same vanity, it was the same toilet in every single house. And it was on the lower end stuff. It was like, well, this is a toilet. There's one for $250, there's one for $150. I'm getting the 150 toilet, right? It's not because you don't want to show off or you don't want to flex a little bit, and I've done that, but I never made money when I did it.
Right.
Like, let's put the highest end, everything, and I'm like, I get creamed when I do that. But when I just stuck to the fundamentals and what I'm good at, little houses, low overhead, it worked really well for me.
Early on in like my journey, I read a book called The Lean Startup.
Yeah, you go. I remember that you said it. Yeah.
And
Eric. Something or other?
I'm going to blank on his name. I'm
okay.
terrible with it. But The Lean Startup, it was a really foundational book before I started ONS.
Yeah.
And it kind of came in with that like mentality of don't go out and raise a bunch of money trying to make this idea work. Start it part-time.
Yes.
Start it as lean as you possibly can. And I've taken that fundamental with me through my entire journey. And it's worked really well because my biggest test was the pandemic so far. The pandemic was a huge test for ONS. And because we didn't rent this massive warehouse and take all this pre-seed money, like we were able to weather the storm and still survive. Had I gone the opposite...
Did sales drop during that time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a whole, 40% drop in retail. And then that's just the consumer side. 40% drop in sales. I saw more closer to 50% drop in sales when I looked at my quarterly numbers and compared them to 2019 to 2020 because I only had 1 year of business before the pandemic hit, and it sucked. But
intelligently, you have another career,
right?
Which is awesome,
right?
I like that about you because you've at least hedged your bet,
right?
If you're just on one thing, it's got to kind of go right,
exactly,
or you're toast,
right? So 2020, not just on the consumer side of seeing a sales drop 40-50%, but my supply chain fell apart. So people talk about, yes, there was a reduction in sales, but also I had to restructure my supply chains. I couldn't get anything.
Wow,
my manufacturer couldn't get the fabrics that I wanted. And then we were held up because there was such a delay with everything. And let's be honest, I'm a small guy. The retail space, I am a micro company in comparison. So I'm not the first guy on the totem pole to get, because I'm not ordering 100,000 units of one shirt. I'm going to be lowest priority. Now my manufacturer was amazing, and they really worked with me, but it was always like, oh, well, this button is not available, so you're going to have to get this button, or you're going to have to wait 3 months, or this fabric's not available, so you're going to have to wait this. And I'm so meticulous with my clothing that I will not make...
You don't want to just put out garbage.
Exactly. Especially in my early stages, right? Like every single time somebody orders from me, this is like, I'm going to give you my best because I want you to come back. And so I can't be like H&M and just put out shit products
produce,
and well, this shirt fell apart after 2 washes, but
Throw it away.
it's H&M. I'll go back and get another one.
Yeah.
You know, so I have to prove myself early on. Like I have
Well,
to
you're
show.
selling a totally different product.
Exactly.
I mean, it's much more high end. Again, better, not bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that really resonates with me. Like I see big companies all the time, and I'm like, okay, $1 billion in sales, you made less than a 1% net profit. Like that's abysmal.
Right.
I mean, who's running this place?
Right.
Like, I could take that tomorrow and increase that. I could double the net profit just by cutting waste.
Right.
You could get in there and cut. They used to do that in the banking world all the time. They'd come in and just cut waste. And I was like, I never understood people who I'm like, you got a fancy office. Great. That does not drive revenue at all. I never understood that.
Yeah.
Like, the lean
So you
startup
don't
is-
even see that within your real estate business. So like when you're a real estate agent, there's like this culture of, I'm gonna be a real estate agent, so I need to drive a Range Rover, you know, because I'm gonna bring clients around and I need to bring them back to my fancy office.
Right.
So if anybody has that like kind of culture,
Yeah.
it would be real estate. Have you noticed any sort of
I just see
if that affects your
people-
business at all?
I see people that are drawn to that. I see agents that are drawn to that, and they're just not the agents for me. Like that just doesn't resonate with me. Like my top salesperson has never used our office once. Like, and you know, their first year they did $9 million. Like their first year, that's a really good first year. There's you know very very few people who some people sell 2 or 3 homes their first year. Just sold like 100 homes or something, right? Or 100 pieces of property. A lot of them are lots too, but to me. It boils down to the image is great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't lead to the bottom line. And I am just brutal about if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. If we're going to drop $10,000 a month in the corner office, I don't see a value there. Like the consumer might naively walk by and be like, wow, fancy. But it's not going to make their service with that agent better. It's not going to make their experience better. They're not going to save any commissions by that. Mm-hmm. And for agents, I'm like, who do you think's paying for the corner office? Like, if you really like going to the fancy offices, just understand you're paying for it as an agent. And I'm like, cool, like go whatever. Like we go out to dinner. I love nice places. I love ambiance, but I understand it's for that hour. And I don't want to be there. I don't want to be sponsoring Capital Grill or Ruth's Chris 24/7, 365. I'll go in there, spend my $200, $300, $400, whatever on dinner, get out of there, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with that, But 24/7, if your overhead is fancy, expensive, over the top. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I've been saying this for a long time. I say the market's too hot. The market's too hot. The market's too hot. It's too hot, too hot, too hot. Because I lived through 05, 06, 07, 08, right?
Well, and I want to get to that too.
Oh, I mean, and people are just telling me I'm crazy. Oh, it's just going to go up forever. Crypto's going to go up forever. Real estate's going to go up forever. I'm like, I saw this before. The interest rates have doubled or more. Like 2.675 to 6.5875. It's doubled. It's going to change. And I'm just ready for it. Right? And if I'm wrong, I just haven't wasted all the money on the fancy office. There are people that are like, I have to have the Gucci office and I have to spend money on the Range Rover. Don't get me wrong. I had a Range Rover, I had a Bentley, all that kind of stuff. I did stupid things. At the end of the day, I realized I am spending a lot of money on trying to impress myself. Like, if that guy likes me more because I'm driving this, does that derive any utility to me at all? And I'm like, it does not actually. Mm-hmm. I have to work harder, put more hours in, take bigger risks to drive a fancier car to impress that guy. Like, my kids are still spilling French fries in the back of the Range Rover or the Kia, and so I drove a Kia. Like I had a Range Rover. The thing broke all the time. It leaked oil everywhere. It was a nightmare. Right. My Kia doesn't break at all. Right. And yes, I know you look cooler pulling up in a Range Rover. I get it, but I just don't care as much as I care about freedom, time with my children, time to myself. Mm-hmm. I work a lot. I do. But a lot of it is internal processing. Where do we go next? What's the next move? Where do we cut?
That's just being an entrepreneur.
It's a 24/7 thing.
You're always going to be thinking about your business, right?
Always.
But it's at least provides you the flexibility to not be in your office 24/7, right?
Well, I love this remote thing.
Right.
Like I have been saying forever, we do not need to get together at a place and all sit down at computers and bug each other all day. I watch agents come into my office and they tell each other stories and then they go to lunch and they tell each other. And I'm like, that's great. That's called hanging out.
Right.
I do a lot of that with people. But it's not working.
Right.
Like people used to come in my office and just tell me stories. I'm like, I'm not going to the office anymore. I work remote mostly. And we started that in the pandemic and I saw so much more productivity. when you separate yourself and you isolate and you can write that contract without distractions, or you can prepare that listing without distractions, so much better.
Right.
When I used to work at the bank, it was a giant building, floor, desk, and I cannot tell you how many times you're trying to write a proposal or draft we call it credit approval package. Somebody walks up to you, hey, memo, blah, meeting, blah, blah. 10 minutes later, get back. You couldn't get anything done.
Right.
And meetings, oh my God. Like, so people are like, when are we doing another meeting? And I'm like, we're not. Like, what do you need to learn how to do something? I'll send a trainer to you. I'll send you a video. We're not doing meetings. Meetings are stupid.
Okay.
They're just dumb, right? Like they're dumb. Like I've been in meetings and I'm like, what are we talking about?
Right.
That guy's playing on his phone. That girl's.
This could have been sent in an email.
All meetings could be done in an email. All emails could be a text.
Right.
Like, we no longer do this. Thank you. Like,
Cool.
There's conference calls, dial in. I'm always like, it's like the Peanuts when their parents are talking.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I get it.
I am potent about the bottom line, and I am so, like, just viciously protective of my time.
I was going to say you've picked your top commodity, and it's
That's
your
it.
time. And so anything that threatens your time, it has to be worth it.
My buddy sent me a list of words a few years back, and he said, you'll be blown away by this. And it was a series of eliminating words.
Okay.
And at the last, you get like 3 or 4, and this is how you know your core values. You pick in a certain order. I can't remember the exact. But mine was family. And like you're supposed to be like, God, Jesus, America. And no, mine was family, number 1. Church was like number 2 or 3. But not God, not Jesus, not religion, and church.
Okay.
My people from church. And then I think the third one was like finances or something like that. Like having liquid assets, it makes me feel good. And and being in debt and being stressed out and having lots of overhead makes me feel real bad.
Right.
And so I just do me now. You know, and I don't care what people say about my car or my house or where I live. I laugh all the way to the bank, and I've never had I'm selling a project today. And I've never felt more safe financially than I do now. And it's from being frugal.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. Like,
Well, so there's a great author. His name's Ramit Sethi. He's a finance author. He wrote a book called
I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Yeah, I'll teach you to be rich. Thank you. And he basically talks about like, what does your rich life look like? Because everybody's rich life looks different.
Totally.
Like you could be living your rich life making $80,000 a year in a remote position that you're able to travel the country, travel the world, working from your laptop.
Yep.
That is a rich life for somebody.
Yep.
Like, because like when most people think about a rich life, they think McMansion, they think yacht, they think, jet setting all over the world.
Yep.
Well, that may be your version of a rich life, but my version would be, I make a comfortable living, but I have the flexibility and freedom to do whatever I want when I want.
That
to me is the best. You and I both know friends and people in our life that, yes, they make multiple $1 million a year, but they're working 60 hours a week and they are chained to their business.
Yes.
And so, unfortunately, it's like, now they may be perfectly happy with that.
Yep.
That's just not for me.
It's not for me either, and again, you get to a certain level and what do they want more? Everybody wants more.
Right.
I don't have that anymore. I did for a long time. Like I need to take over the world. And it's gone. Life beats it out of you. You get smarter by being dumb, unfortunately. Like by doing dumb things, you learn and then you adapt. You're like, well, that was dumb. I lost $100,000 on a car. Or maybe I shouldn't do that again, or maybe I should, maybe I don't need 14 bathrooms, like you get smarter over time. Right. And you're right. Your rich life, it's to me, what I do isn't work for me. Right. So I'll start by saying that people who are like, you should do what you love. I literally, like, if you were like, you could be a professional poker player, I'd be like, I don't want to sit in a casino all day long with a bunch of, or hey, you should be a professional athlete. I'm like, I don't want to run sprints all day long. Like, I love what I do more than anything I could ever imagine. It is exactly what I'm meant to do. I'm wired to do this. And that's why I keep coming back to, I've dabbled in other things. I tried this, tried that. I'm like, it's just not for me. This is what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And it's where I shine, and it's my gift. It's what I love doing. And every day, it's not like I don't really work because it's not work to me.
Right.
It's a thrill. It's like people are like, I love to gamble or I love to race cars. I'm like, I am gambling all day long every day. I don't need any more gambles, like
Your risk tolerance is maxed.
my risk tolerance is maxed,
Yeah.
right? Like I am putting a lot of money into this business over and over and over again, right? So to me, I think you'll be happier, like with the things that you're doing that you're really into. Like you love your brand and a company that you're building. Awesome, do that, right? Like do things you love. You love your day job is something you love doing. Like you get to be an artist. I mean, how cool is that, right? No, you're not touring the globe playing shows, but wouldn't that kind of be a pain in the butt? Like you get to be, do a rock show every weekend.
Yeah, no, I
and you
lost
don't have
that
to travel.
desire. Yeah, I lost that desire a long time ago.
You don't have to travel. You play a rock show every week. People, Ricardo, we love you. You have fans that come see you week in and week out. You don't play in divey bars. You don't have to travel. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like
No, I mean, my life is exactly the way I want it to be. I
That's great.
tell people all the time, like I get to do two amazing things for work.
Yep.
And I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like
I
I get to work with people that I love, and I get to do things like this. You know, it's
fun,
like
right?
this is what I love to do.
Yep.
I wanted to talk about kind of like, so when you're in your 20s,
Yeah.
you're making multi-million-dollars a year in real estate. You're building this empire, and then 08 happens.
Yeah.
And the housing bubble crashes, and banks are calling their loans.
That was the hard part, yeah.
So what did your life look like leading up to that? And then what happened? Because I feel like that was kind of the turning point for you and your mindset now. Because Josh Blank hasn't always been like this. Like, yes, you've had the frugality, but
that's a new thing.
that's a new thing,
For sure.
right? So what happened during that process?
So money and they had expanded. The Fed was printing money, for lack of a better term. They were expanding the balance sheet. After 9/11, which was very similar to COVID, they lowered the Fed funds rate to 1%. Banks were giving out loans at 4%, and that was unheard of. My first mortgage was 7 something.
Right.
Rates were 4. Same thing just happened. You could buy a lot more house for the same payment. You just did it. I had done that. I was like, man, my payment was $1,500. I can buy this way bigger house. Rates just dropped. I can take my profit out of that house, move into this one. My payment stays the same. Woo-hoo.
Right.
So rates went down, and I just went crazy. I bought with 2 fists. And a lot of it was very fundamentally sound, good stuff. It was small single-family homes that rented out. They cash flowed. It was a good business. What happened was my bank failed, and they were pulling my credit facilities. So I had a line of credit that allowed me to go to auctions, buy properties, renovate them, resell them. And that was how I made my big money. My rental properties were fine. They cash flowed. They were fine, but they weren't my income.
Yeah. You were doing the Robert Kiyosaki model, basically.
I was doing like a lot of the buy, fix, rent out, and I had a bunch of rentals. Well, I kind of couldn't manage that and support that because my money maker was taken away. My line of credit, I had a $3 million line of credit with a bank. The bank went under. And no banks were lending. I couldn't find capital to flip with. So I went the hard money route for a couple years and just grinded it out, paying these guys 10, 12% interest rates. Well, there wasn't a lot of money left.
Right.
And I ran out of steam. I had like an emotional breakdown. I was like, I cannot run 50 rental properties or whatever I had. I couldn't afford staff anymore because things were so lean. I was living on my savings. I was trying to remodel houses on the cash that I had. But my life was set up to have a massive line of credit. I had a massive line of credit. It wasn't like 1 year. I had year after year after year. This bank gave me more and more money, and I just expanded with that. And I let the creep happen. My creep went up. I went from my house payment went up. My car payments went up. Then I bought another car. Then and all of a sudden I looked around and I'm like, man, my nut is huge. Like I've got to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to pay my overhead.
Right.
And so I just fell apart. I fell apart emotionally. I fell apart mentally. I remember sitting in the basement of my house, and it was a nice basement. It wasn't like the bank basement. But I remember sitting there trying to manage 50 rental properties by myself while my daughter was down in the office with me, and I was pulling my hair out trying to get them to pay, and I didn't have a line of credit anymore. I couldn't go buy, fix, and sell houses. And it was just all falling apart, and I was like, what have I done? I made myself way too big. I outkicked my coverage. Had I had 10 rental properties and a nice little tidy house that, a lot of equity in it, but I was just in expand mode.
Yeah.
Oh, I got this project that's working. Let me refinance that, take it out and buy another. Let me do it again. And I got too big. Ego got too big. And I fell apart by volume. I made it too big for one person to manage. And I had to go to some banks I cut deals with. Some banks wouldn't cut deals. They were like, no. And so I ended up in bankruptcy, and I lost everything. And then I came down here, started trying to rebuild, and I was like, man, this is brutal. What am I going to do in Florida? I'll try to rehab houses. That didn't really work. I'll sell condos on the beach. really wasn't my thing. Like, I didn't like, being an agent. I actually much prefer being a broker. I like building businesses. So I built this little business, and we started out, and basically we went from, a couple people and a small operation to now we've got 47 agents, and it's doing really well. I'm really happy with it. But, going through that, the crash was bad. I mean, It was like they didn't lend money. If you had a home equity loan, they'd say, loan gone. At this line of credit not renewed.
You got to pay it now.
You got to pay it. And then there was like, people were like, hey, well, you owe $100,000 on this house. It's not worth $100,000 anymore. You can pay it down. Well, I don't have the money. Like, I used your money to buy it. Like,
right.
It was a credit crisis.
Yeah.
Like, nobody was lending.
Right.
It was an absolute credit crisis, and I was, stupid and young and lived, way too above my means.
Yeah.
Not crazy above my means. I lived for a long time on savings, trying to like work deals out with people. But
I think a lot of times we just think, oh, this is just the way it's going to be forever.
That's what they think.
Right.
I mean, you see it now with kids in crypto, right? All the young guys, they're like, oh my God, my crypto was 67,000. Now it's 19,000. I'm big on now trying to keep that creep from happening. So if your income expands, which again, now my income has expanded a little bit, I still live beneath my means. But it's not fun. It's not a sexy thing. It's not like, hey, save. Right? Nobody's like, oh, that guy's awesome. You listen to Kiyosaki, and he's like, borrow your wealth and other people will pay it back for you. That only works when interest rates are coming down, which over the last 40, 50 years, that's all that's been happening. It does not work when rates go up, right? You can't do that. It blew up in my face, and I believe that stuff, hook, line, and sinker. Borrow your fortune and let somebody else pay it off for you. Buy these houses, use the bank's money, the tenant will pay it off. It didn't work, like the market crashed during my run of that. So now I'm much more, cash, save, not a huge investor, don't have a lot of projects going out there. Kind of stick to what I know, and rates are going up. Yeah. So the market is coming down. We've already seen the stock market's down 20%, crypto's down 60%. There's some reckoning coming. I don't know what'll happen in real estate. Anybody who tells you have the crystal ball, BS.
Right.
Like BS. They all know. I had a sneaking suspicion. Crypto seemed a little weird to me. I was like, what? Like, I don't get it. Felt like pets.com, but
well, and the thing is too, like you said, nobody has a crystal ball. Like in March of 2020, when the housing market just halted,
I freaked out.
I mean, I know.
I was like, this is 2.0.
Yeah.
I was like, we're done. We're done again.
We were talking a lot on the phone, and we were talking to our buddy Nick, who's a financial advisor.
Yep.
And it was just
I almost won the bet. We had a bet. I said the market's going to go down by 50%. He said it'll recover, and it went down like 40. And
you still owe us a steak dinner.
I think I do.
Yeah. I'm going to cash that in. You told on
right
yourself.
Now. I did. I just snarked on myself. No, he was right. But it took a 40% dip.
It did.
And it's down 20 now. It's down 20%
Yeah,
now.
but would you have ever predicted the fact that the housing market was going to go as nuts as it did?
I went the exact opposite.
Right.
So I was living in an apartment at the time, and the apartment rents are pretty expensive around here. And I found a way to buy a house, and it was just a great deal. The structure was just awesome. And it allowed me to cut my overhead. I was able to buy a house, and my payment went down.
Right.
Now, it's not real sexy. It's not a beach mansion, right? It's a house in the middle of nowhere. It's really humble, but it lets me sleep at night. And I survived the pandemic by that. Now, I did not think that the market would spike like that. I was wrong. But the nice thing is when you're frugal and you live beneath your means, you can be wrong a lot and still recover.
Right.
When you're at the tipping point of like, here's my bills and here's my income.
Right.
If you're wrong, you're done.
Yeah.
So I was able to buy a house, cut my overhead again. I had no idea the market was going to take off. One of the places that we do a lot of advertising with called me up, and they're like, hey, we know this is a pandemic. We know this is a problem. We'll, lower your funds or lower your rates or, cut to deal with you, or we'll just give you a ton more advertising. And I was like, very nervous, and I was like, I'll take the advertising. Mm-hmm. So I doubled down on my advertising during the pandemic, but I was only able to do that because I cut my personal overhead.
Right.
And that worked out really well.
So the liquidity allowed you to do things that...
It allowed me to grow my business in a time that I had not expected it to work, and it worked great.
Yeah. So as someone who's kind of in the trenches of, like, in the throw of building a business while also working in a full-time job and managing a family...
Yeah.
There is a point, like, you can't just start off like working a few hours a week and expect your business to
No,
grow,
no, it
right?
doesn't
So
work.
like you have to grind in the beginning.
For
like
sure.
there has to be the work has to be put in. And I know when you were building Trend, like
Oh.
you were working your ass off for years trying to build it up.
2017, 18, 19, those were the hardest years of my life, by far. I worked more hours in those 3 years, figuring out what works, figuring out how to do it. And it was up at 6, 7 in the morning, solving problems, taking care of things, and working till 7, 8 o'clock at night, coming home, taking care of the kids, and then starting again at 11. Like it would, the amount of work I put in those 3 years was insane. So if I'm working 40 or 50 hours now in a week, it feels like nothing compared to then. You know, it's way easier. But no, you have to in the beginning. I just had no other options. Like my personal family situation was just a disaster. I had 2 children that I was a primary caregiver for. I couldn't really take a job because I had to drop off, pick up. A buddy of mine called me. He's like, hey, come work for me. I'll give you 6 figures. You'll be on a plane every week. I'm like, can't do it.
Right.
Like I can't travel with children. That, like, what am I going to leave them with my mom?
Right.
Like she's old, she's sick. Like I can't do it. So it's like I had no option but to make this work. And I just remember running around that apartment building one day and I'm like, I am going to do this no matter what. And I was like, I'm going to figure something out. And we did. We figured like a very small niche that really works for us. We figured it out. It's working great. But I remembered that run and like vividly, I was like, I'm going to do this if it kills me. Like there's no other option. I'm doing this no matter what. Because a lot of times on your journey, you're like, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should change. Maybe I should do something else. Like we get distracted. And if you can focus and get through that like couple year period, it'll be well worth it.
Well, I think too, it's like this is, I don't make any money with ONS, right?
Right.
Like you, for the first like 5 years, like all the money that comes in goes right back into the company.
Oh, I lost money the first year.
Right. So it's just like one of those things that you have to be in it for the love of the game and for the belief that this thing is going to work.
I literally didn't have any other options.
Well,
I was like, I don't know what else I could do.
But sometimes you just need that. Like you don't like you hear the gym bros always say like, oh, there's no plan B. There's
Right.
only plan A.
Right.
Well, there is something to that, right? Like there is no plan B. I
what was I going to do?
Right.
Go back to work at a bank?
Right.
Like I was like, what? Why? I haven't worked at a bank in 20 years.
Right.
Like, what are we talking about?
But you have to have this like blind delusion sometimes, and you bet on yourself.
It's a huge bet.
Right.
It's super hard. I do not. People are like, oh, it's great. I'm like, it's like 20% of the time it's awesome, and 80% of the time it's like living hell.
Right.
Like, it's so hard. It's so
Right.
bad.
Right.
You don't know if it's going to work. You're trying. Like, imagine working an entire year and losing money.
Yeah.
Like I've done that many times. Like the whole year's profit was negative. I'm like, like, why am I doing this? I can work at McDonald's and make more money.
Right.
Like, I've had years where I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm like, oh my God, like, what are we doing?
Right.
So but if you can get through that, if you can survive the BKs, if you can survive those things, and believe me, those are not fun times.
Right.
But they make you better. They
Yeah.
make you, more frugal, more old school. I know it's not sexy. Everybody likes the high flying, young, multiples trading at 30 times earnings. I'm like, how about 6? How about 5? How about 2? I like businesses that trade at 3 multiples, 5 multiples.
Right.
So, I mean, if you can get through those insane valleys, the peaks. Somebody asked me once, "What's on your bucket list?" And I was like, "Nothing." And they're like, "Nothing?" I'm like, "No, I did it all. I did everything I ever wanted to do. I had the supercar, I had the McMansion, I owned my own business, and all I wanted to do in life was prove I could do it a second time." Because everybody was like, "Oh, you got lucky in a bull market." And don't get me wrong, this is a bull market right now, but we are set up to do well through the next bear market. And we did really well in 17, 18, 19. We did fine in kind of more of a normal market.
Right.
2021, 22, it's a little goofy, but having been able to do it again, to find something, to make it work, I had to prove it to myself, not to anybody else. I don't care what anybody else thinks or says. I had to prove it to myself that it wasn't just a fluke.
Right.
Like, could I do this? And am I good enough to make 2 little small businesses? They're nothing crazy. Could I make them work? Could I get to that income level that I feel proud of? And it doesn't need to be millions of dollars. It doesn't have to be crazy, but if I can make that register ring and say to myself, okay, you're different than a lot of people. You were able to do it. Now, it doesn't have to be, there's levels, right? Like if you were, I would equate it to like if you were a great high school basketball player and you just weren't good enough to go D1. Right. But you had a great career and you're really happy with it. That's how I feel about me and my business. I feel like I have a great career. I'm really happy with it. It doesn't need to be, the biggest real estate company. Even in our area, I don't care. I'm like, I want an income number that I'm happy with, and I have that, and I'm thrilled.
Right.
And it's not an insane number.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be, And when you can have limits on if you're constantly chasing more, Scott Adams, I think, said it. He said goals and systems.
Yeah.
He's like,
I love that
you're
dude.
looking for he's right about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Goals, you're in pain the entire time. When you set up a system you love, like you love your day and you can make a little money and you can kind of grow that, that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
If every day I can, take a long walk or go to the gym or lift some weights or whatever, and every day I can hang out with my kids and every day I can fire the agents I don't like and hire the agents I do like, that's a really great thing. I don't have people in my company that I just have because I can't stand, Tommy over there. He's a real jerk, but we need the money. Like,
Right.
I don't have to do that, right? So if you can live on your own terms and have what you view as success, man, there's nothing better than that in the world. You know?
Yeah, I think a lot of times like we get blindsided by or not blindsided, but blinded by this Instagram reality
For sure.
of life, and 90% of that shit is fake.
Totally.
And I
Look
think
at the people and then you're like, they're on there and they're smiling and they're happy, and then you see them fighting all the time.
But I think like what you said was perfect. It's about finding what success means to you.
Yep.
And pursuing that.
Absolutely.
And for me, I've got a very direct line of what I view as success.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what the number would be. I know exactly what the life would look like.
Yep.
And that's enough for me, right?
I think you're there. I mean, I think you have a great house. You have a great.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love my life.
Yeah.
I love my life. I
think you'd probably want to do a little more of this, though, right?
Right,
You
sure.
want to grow this brand.
Sure.
Right?
And that's where the drive comes from, right?
Yeah.
To continue to pursue this thing. And I joke around a lot because you have to as entrepreneurs, you have to have a little bit of disillusion in yourself, or
For sure.
delusion in yourself. And
I mean,
belief.
if I told myself now what it was going to take then, I'd have gotten a job.
Yeah.
If I now would say to my 2017 self, this is what's going to happen, and this is what you're going to have to do, and this is how it's going to go, I'd say, I'm just going to go get a job.
Yeah.
I would never pay that price.
Right.
It was an accident.
Well, and it also what entrepreneurship has taught me is that it is the most humbling thing.
Yes.
One of the most humbling things you can do as an individual, because it is so much to work your ass off to put out, whether it be a product or a system or a company, to the world and say, here, everyone, judge my hard work, right? And there's this roller coaster of emotions that happens within an hour of your day of like, this is the best idea. This is a terrible idea. This is awesome.
Right.
I love this. Oh no, shit. I made a mistake. Like it's so all over the place. And you and I are pretty similar on our emotional levels. Like you and I can go from a 1 to a 10, pretty easily. And our buddy Jesse is like a stoic. He's perfect for business because he's like 5, 6 all the time. He doesn't, his highs are not super highs and his lows are not super low. And he's just built for this. But you and I have this more emotional roller coaster at times to where it's like, this is such a proving ground for what you can take as an individual.
Yeah, I mean, that old like Rocky Balboa quote, like how many times you can hit and get back up.
Right.
That's just what it is. Like, unfortunately, people are like, what's the magic? What's the secret? And I'm like, the secret is there's not a secret.
Right.
The secret is it's an up at dawn. Like there's a line from Jerry Maguire. He's like, you have no idea what I do for you, Rod. This is an up at dawn, pride swallowing seeds that I'll never fully explain to you. It's like, that's how I view this. Like somebody said something kind of snarky to me in a text the other day, like, well, you approved that document. Have a great rest of your day. You see you're working hard. I'm like, dude, you have no idea what I've done behind the scenes to make this work. Like we are pulling apart data for hundreds of hours every year to find out what is working, where we're moving, how things are going, what's the best avenue for our advertising. We are working on that behind the scenes that nobody knows what they're doing. They think I'm just like throwing darts at the dartboard. No, it's working because we're so strategic about what we're doing.
Well, and it's not to mention the years of hell that you put yourself through to
Well, yeah.
build the initial business.
All the things I did wrong.
Right, exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I have a couple $100,000 in a degree of stupidity, right? Like maybe millions now. Like, all the things I've done wrong that didn't work. But
Right.
I mean, to me, it is a 24/7 thing for me. Like, yes, I can come in here and do this, and I got a couple meetings, and I can drive home. But when I'm like alone by myself, it's all I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
How to grow, what the next piece is. If we added this person, what would the cost be? What would the revenue be? Okay, what is that going to do? Okay, is that going to help? Is that going to hurt? That's what I'm doing all day long. And we make very small changes, but they have huge impacts. Like, we've done a couple of things that have just an enormous impact that people don't even realize what we're doing. And like behind the scenes, what one of my employees does, man, I mean, without this person, I could not do this, right? I just could not do, or it would just be really sloppy. A lot of companies they don't have lots of compliance. Like I'm very strict with compliance. I want my paperwork tight. I want to be legal. I want, if there's any sort of problem, I want to be able to knock it out. And so I'm very, I'm consulting attorneys all the time. I'm very anal with that because I've seen people, just get sloppy with their paperwork, and it can be a problem.
Right.
So I'm big on compliance, and we do a really, really good job there. A title company the other day told us, like, you guys are the best when it comes to compliance and getting your paperwork together. And I think those little things, it's like fundamentals in basketball. Like, everybody's like, oh, LeBron James can jump out of the gym. I think of it like a Steph Curry type player, right?
Yeah.
Like, not some super freak athlete, but just the fundamentals are so sound. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make this company fundamentally sound, not huge, don't have to make $1 million a year, nothing like that. But if we're fundamentally sound, we'll live through bull markets, we'll live through bear markets, and we'll find the next, like I called the company Trend, because there's always a trend in real estate where you can make money. And if you can just keep your fingers on the pulse, and I'm sure it's true in your business, if you can keep your fingers on the pulse of what's happening, you can really do well. Like when the market fell apart and the foreclosures and short sales, there were agents making bazillions of dollars selling short sales or selling foreclosure. There's so many ways to make money in a bull or bear market, and it's just staggering to me. And a lot of it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
People think more meetings, more training, more, and I'm like, less. Like, I think if you give somebody a list of 10 things to do in a day, they're going to do 0. If you give them a list of 1 to 2 things, they might both get done.
Right.
So I keep things short. I keep them simple. I try. We're going to do a happy hour in a couple of days, or maybe next week or something. We're not doing tons of training. We'll get together. We'll have fun. But the training's got to be like one-on-one, not stupid meetings all the time. I'm just not into it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's countercultural. It's counterintuitive. Everybody wants to do more parties, more getting together, more meetings, more training. I'm like, no. Let's just do less better. That book, Essentialism.
Yeah.
Oh my!
I was going to say a lot of
jam.
your structure. Like, I know a lot of the way you live your life currently is built off of books like Essentialism and like the philosophers like the Stoics. What's the main one you quote all the time?
Marcus Aurelius is probably my favorite.
Right.
I mean, some of the things I hear him say and do. I mean, I don't know where that guy came from, but like it's amazing. He's the most powerful person in the world. He can do anything he wants, and he's constantly checking himself. And I dig that. You know, like I heard somebody say the other day, and it's talking about like emperors and kings and wealthy people, right? I heard somebody say today, the currency is not actually currency. The currency is envy. And I really like that because everybody today, 2022, lives so much better than John D. Rockefeller Sr. did in whenever he died, 1900 or 1920 or whatever. Like in that 100-year period, everybody from 1920, billionaire, millionaire, whatever, would trade their life to live now.
Right.
And we don't think about that at all. We just think, oh, that guy's got a better car, or that guy's got a better house, or that guy's got more muscles, or that guy's got a prettier girl, or whatever it is, right? Whatever currency people trade in. They never reflect on like how awesome what they have is. They always think about what they don't have. And that hit me. I was like, yes, we live today, air conditioning, cars, any movie you want, any time you want. Think about that, right? We're spoiled. We live better than people who were, 20 years ago, the richest people in the world, 30 years ago, the richest people in the world. We live better than them now.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Yeah. The fact that you can literally be sitting on your couch and you pull out your phone and you know what, I'm hungry, and you click a couple buttons and food is at your house.
100 years ago, they think you were a god.
Well, yeah. You had servants that you had to pay.
They weren't even, but the servants it's not like boop, boop, boop. Air conditioning, right? like they have to fan you with a palm frond or something. Like, what are we talking about? Like,
right?
Oh, so it's 72 in here. I'd like it's 71. Boop. Like, we live like gods compared to like most of humanity. Right. And
that's
nobody
why
thinks about that.
I think gratitude is so important in life.
It is for sure.
And I think that's something. My wife and I, Laura, did a talk on gratitude. This was about a year ago.
I remember that. Yeah.
And my wife's a therapist. She's a master's in social work.
Yep.
So this is what she deals with on a day-to-day basis when she's seeing clients is,
Yep.
Looking at the bigger picture. Like, yes, you're going through this shit right now and it sucks.
Yep.
But what are the things that you can focus on that you're grateful for?
Mm-hmm.
What does gratitude look like to you?
Yep.
And I had a buddy of mine that told me, he's like, he's just going through a really rough time. And I was just like, I told him, I was like, I just want to see you happy. And he said, my happiness is not dependent on my situation. He's like, I live a life of gratitude and happiness despite what may be happening to me, because down to the core, I am thankful for, going to a light switch and turning it on.
Magic.
I'm grateful for that.
Right.
And living like that extreme life of gratitude and understanding, like, I am blessed no matter what happens to me. Like, I am blessed that I get to do the things that I get to do.
For sure.
And life sucks sometimes. I get that. And some people are dealt much worse hands than others. But living the life of gratitude, I really truly believes breeds more success.
For sure.
And more happiness in your life.
For sure.
So that's just one of the things. Like, I that's why I love the Greek philosophers. I think that it's unbelievable to me. And I'm going to have Dr. Troy Doucet on here soon on the ONS podcast to talk about philosophy, because I think it's such an important thing that we need to really focus on. And I joked with him because I was listening to Gad Saad, I believe is how you say his name.
Saad, right?
Yeah, and he was talking about, he's like, the most frustrating thing in philosophy is that you as a philosopher, you're like constantly thinking, oh, what's this new thought? What's this new idea? What's this new thought? And he's like, I'll come up with something, and it'll be like, I'll Google it and be like, oh, the Greeks already thought of that.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
It's like there's no new thought. Like, they were just so advanced. And so I think understanding Greek philosophy is really valuable. And there's a lot of knowledge that we can even take in today.
Yep.
So I definitely want to have him on. But one of the last things I want to talk to you about is if you were to go back to young 24-year-old Josh, starting your business, we've covered a lot, but what are some of the fundamental ideas, books? I know you're a big reader, podcasting, absolutely. Like, what are some of those like fundamental things that you would hand your younger self and say, like, listen to me, kid, these are the mistakes that I made. Don't do this.
You got to read Rich Dad. You got to read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek.
You're basically living 4-Hour Workweek now.
Trying. Yeah. You got to read Rework by Jason Fried. It's a very simple book, but it is so profound. It's like my dad wrote it. Like, I've never seen anybody like say the things that my dad said. Like, you got to understand, the guy was in corporate America for like 28 years and just hated it and just got through it. But he was just always stunned at the stupidity that corporate America brought, and that it just rubbed off on me. So those are a few really good ones. Essentialism is incredible. Those are the game changer ones.
Okay.
Those and most of them are just you can get out of Tim Ferriss's book. The 4-Hour Workweek is about deleting, eliminating, automating, and leveraging, within your business. And that's if you read one, that's it. Like, he goes into like weird stuff about like dancing and karate and all this, whatever. But like the efficiency within your business, that stuck with me. I was on my honeymoon. I read that book and I was like, I am doing this wrong. I am grinding, and I need to automate a little bit and get some help. And it was a big game changer. If you're making, $400,000 or $500,000 a year and you have one good $40,000 employee or one good $70,000 employee, you're going to make $70,000 less, but you're going to have a way better life.
Right.
So if you can surround yourself with some really talented people, that's huge.
Yeah.
And then for like, those are the books I would give myself, which I've now read. Maybe some Marcus. I'd definitely give myself the Stoics a lot earlier in life. I picked that up a little late. But with practical advice is just overhead is death. Overhead in a business is death. It's burning money. You work really hard to get the profit in. Don't burn it out the back door. Personal overhead, I'm just not a big fan of it anymore either. I think liquidity is super important. My first big thing was, yes, I was a multimillionaire in my 20s, right? Multimillionaire in my 30s. And then the asset goes to nothing, and now I'm a negative millionaire, right? Paper assets, it's even real estate with lots of equity, that can change like this.
Yeah.
Right. You can, like we've seen the last couple of years, you went from everybody now has $200,000 more equity in their house.
Right.
It can also go the other way.
Right.
Which it's done before.
Right.
So be careful and cautious with that. I have to say liquidity is huge. If you don't have a good amount of savings, not investing. I'm not saying like your 30-year, 20-year, 30-year money you put in your 401k, IRA, SEP, whatever you're doing.
Right.
Liquidity, like easy access cash. I'm huge on liquidity. And that's something I wasn't early on. If I had $100,000, like, let's put in another project, have another 100, put in another. I don't do that anymore. So I would stay liquid. I would read those books. Those are great ones. I would keep my life a lot more simple. I would definitely say if you have, a house, a vacation house, and a main house, and a boat, and the car, and all this kind of stuff, it just becomes a noose, really. Like the things, like the Fight Club line, the things you own end up owning you. And that was my experience. I was like, I gotta keep this house maintained. It's as simple as cleaning your house. If you have a 5,000 square foot house, it's a lot more money to clean that than if you have a 2,000 square foot house.
Yeah.
So little things like that. And then I would just be more forgiving to myself, like having, really effed up in my career early. I was so hard on myself. Like, how are you so stupid? How did you do this? How did this fall apart? I would just have a little bit more empathy for myself. 90% of entrepreneurs file bankruptcy at some point. I had never seen a real estate market collapse. I just thought real estate always went up. I was like, you can't lose.
Well, it was a safe bet up until 2008.
I couldn't imagine it going down.
Right.
It was like if the sky turned red one day and it just never stopped being red for the rest of your life, or purple. Like, what are we talking about?
You've seen The Big Short, right?
Now, yeah.
So there's that line that guy's talking. The guy that's like, we're going to short the housing market, and they're like, nobody shorts real estate.
Exactly. Yep.
And
I just didn't think it could go down. I didn't think it was humanly possible. I was like, this can't go down. Like, it doesn't go down.
Yeah.
Inflation, it always goes up. I just wasn't old enough. I didn't see market cycles. I saw one big bull market. From 2000, 9/11 happens. They lower rates to nothing. I'm an adult at, my first job is in 2001. And by 2006, I was a genius. I bought a bunch of houses, and you're a genius. And then 2008, you're a moron. Mm-hmm. And it's like, none of those things were true. I was doing a business that was fundamentally sound, trying to do the right thing, trying to help people, selling my buddies' houses, me buying houses, thinking it's a long-term play. And, what the Fed does and what they're doing now, it can take a really good business and it can make it crap.
Yeah.
So you ever watch a Floyd Mayweather fight?
Sure.
I would say I used to fight like Mike Tyson, like haymakers, crazy. Like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah.
Fun to watch, right?
Right.
Now I fight like Floyd.
Yeah. You don't get hit.
Nobody hits me.
Yep.
Right? I'm backing up the whole time. I'll hit you 3 times in a round.
Yeah.
It'll be very boring. You'll pay a lot of money to see the fight. I'll talk a lot of trash beforehand, and I won't get hit once. And
he's 50-0.
He's 50-0.
He figured something out.
He figures something out.
Yeah.
Be more defensive than you think you need to be. That's what I would tell somebody like myself. There are some people I'm like, hey, you got to get off the fence. You got to throw a couple punches.
Right.
But for people like me that are kind of driven, and I'd be like, you have to have better defense. Like, you're going to get messed up.
No, this is all things that I'm taking to heart, because like I'm doing this podcast selfishly because I need advice from guys like you.
Yeah. No.
That you're further down that line than I am. You're like ahead of me on that branch, and understanding these fundamentals like is super helpful to me.
Yeah.
Because I've made a shit ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
It's just what you do. Like, there's really not. If there was I'm really good with instructions.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I'm really good with, If you come to me and you tell me, Josh, Ricardo, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll have a successful business,
Yep.
I would do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
No problem.
Yep.
But there is no game plan. There is
Right.
no game like instruction book on how to do this
Yep.
100% of the time. You just have to figure it out.
Well, and it's so hard because there's these pockets within pockets within pockets within businesses.
Right.
Like you're in the retail, industry. But your specific focus is so different than like you say, like an H&M, right?
Right.
Not the same business model, right? Within real estate, we do something that's so unique. It's a very niche thing, and it's like I had to kind of fumble into it. Just like I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to go buy houses at the auction. It just happened. A buddy, a guy who did my floors was like, you got to meet this other guy. The other guy's like, we buy him at the auction. I'm like, the auction? What is that? And then that was a game changer. Like we went from doing things, we abandoned what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to hunt and peck, and you're going to figure out whatever you're doing now in 6 months or 2 years or whatever, you probably won't be doing that. You're probably doing something totally different. And we're doing that too. We're evolving all the time. I am not thinking double the top line this next year or the following year. I'm thinking keep the top line the same or as close as we can. And I'm thinking more efficient within.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking, right? So if there's ways that you can, within your industry, whatever, figure out, just be open to changing. Because that's one thing I'm pretty good at is staying open to change. Whatever's working today might not work forever, so let's adapt.
Yeah.
I mean, evolution, baby. Adapt or die.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what business is, man.
Exactly.
Like what I started out doing and what I'm doing now, two totally different things.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to like praise your resilience in this whole thing because
I appreciate it,
what
man.
you've gone through, and I didn't see you back. I didn't know you back in 2008.
Yep.
I caught you when you first moved down here, and you had just.
You saw the come up.
I saw the come up.
Yeah.
But I've heard the stories and the shit that you've gone through, even in the time that I've known you, and your resilience to weather the storm and just keep going.
Right.
Like that's an inspiration to me because I'm like, this guy, my
This
little
guy's crazy.
problems that I
Right.
have within my business, Josh has seen 100 times.
Yeah. No
And
doubt.
he continues to push through. He continues to because I think it's because you have that singular focus on what your objective is.
Yep.
And everything is measured against that.
Yep.
If this doesn't bring me closer to that goal, I'm not going to do it. We're going to cut it
Exactly
out.
right. Yep.
And I think that's such a good way to run a business.
I am laser focused on just a couple things.
Yeah.
You're right about that. And I think you are as well. I mean, obviously, if you can do what you've done, like physically transform your body, I know you can do business. I mean, anybody can do the business, but you're probably in that place where you need some sort of serendipitous thing to happen, and then everything evolves, sales grow, bottom line comes up. You got to dance around that, right?
Yeah.
Like wherever you're at right now, like 2019 was very different than what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Totally different business model.
Yeah.
We don't do the same thing. We are a different company. And I never thought I would do this, but I was like, that doesn't work. That works. Let's do more of that.
Yeah.
You'll figure that out too.
Yeah.
You'll look around and you're like, this is the thing that's working. I'm going to follow that.
And it's definitely starting to happen because early on, 2019 was a great first year for ONS.
Yeah.
Then 2020 happened. It was
Yep.
a terrible fucking year.
Yep.
It was brutal.
Yep.
I literally, I remember having a conversation with a buddy of mine in 21 saying, I basically had to start over.
Yeah.
I had to start over. Like there was.
I've only had to do that about 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah. I was able to keep the name.
Yep.
The business did not go under, but
Yep.
I had to start over.
Yep.
And thankfully I was able to maintain, I paid my bills, and I was able to finagle things and work things out and maintain relationships. But at the end of the day, it was just I made a lot of mistakes, it was just, but
Pull out your P&L. I do this once a week, and pretend you're going to invest in your own company and look and say, what can I cut?
Right.
I am pulling out my P&L and looking at things to cut and to the point where it's like, well, you can't not have a bank account. You can't not be a part of the board.
Right.
I have drilled it down to
Right.
just the essentials. But
Yeah.
if you do that every day, all the time, and you're going to find that serendipitous thing where it's like, there are a couple times I've been like, oh, that's how you do this.
Right. Right.
And I'll tell you one last thing. I'll tell you. Guy comes in my basement. He checked out what we were doing in our office in Chicago, and he was like, So wait, you do what? I'm like, we find the asset for the customer. We renovate it we help them renovate it. We help them lease it. We help them do property management. He goes, what do you charge? I'm like, X. And he's like, triple it. And I was like, triple it? I'm like, they're already bitching about X. He goes, they're going to bitch about X or half of X or 5 times X. But he's like, the market will pay triple X. And I was like, wow. And I slowly started raising my prices. And I was like, everybody's still paying. They're bitching still, but they bitched before anyway. And I wasn't making a living, I was drowning,
Right.
And now I'm like, oh. So I would say, and Jesse's big on this all the time too, is don't be the cheap guy.
Yeah.
Provide a great service, do something a little different, do something unique, be full price.
Right. Yeah. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I'm not like, my clothing is not cheap. And I
No.
understand that within the men's retail space. Men
Yep.
don't particularly like spending a lot of money on clothing.
Yep.
But you also have to prove yourself. Like if you're going to be expensive, your work has to be worth that.
Right.
And the biggest compliment I get is when people get the clothing, they see the packaging, they have
Yep.
the experience,
Yep.
and then they're like, wow, this is actually really nice.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they can see the difference that
Yep.
like this is not a $5 shirt from H&M
Right.
that falls apart.
Yep.
Like this clothing is going to last you a really long time.
Yep.
And I think that's where it's like, if you are going to have a certain amount, like if you are going to be not the cheap guy,
Yep.
you have to prove yourself with the quality.
For sure.
And you have to show why you're not the cheap guy.
Absolutely.
And that's just, I don't know. I have a hard time. Like I want to do everything to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And this is,
Well, the product matches you. I mean, you're trying to have your physical form in the best possible way. You're trying to have your brand the best possible way. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's logical. It makes sense. But I just think you're going to catch that serendipitous, like, moment soon.
Yeah.
Like that's a couple times I'm like, like I felt like I like found a cave of diamonds.
Right.
Like, oh
Yeah.
yes, this is the way. Right.
Yeah.
So you're there, brother. You're there.
well, Josh, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, my man.
This is, it's always helpful to have these conversations, and I know people will really appreciate this, especially if they're about to start their journey or they're in the middle of their journey.
Yeah.
This is something that I think is always valuable to have conversations with people that are a little further down the road than you are, that
Yep.
can provide knowledge and insight into what you may be doing wrong. And I'm already taking mental notes like, all right, I'm going to go check my P&L now.
No, that's good, man. That's good. I appreciate it, man.